Hi, and good morning from Columbia, South Carolina. Continuing on here in Romans chapter 3. And I may need to do more than one video here for Romans 3. Some of this stuff, guys, is pretty deep. I want to just for time's sake, I want to try to kind of get through this. So I urge people to get out there and be Bereans and study this on their own as well. All right, let's begin. Romans 3 verse 1. What advantage then hath the Jew, or what profit is there of circumcision? Much every way, chiefly because unto them were committed the oracles of God. Listen, so Romans 1, we declare the unrighteousness of the heathen. In Romans 2, we declare the unrighteousness of the Jew who has the law, and the Gentile who, although is not living like the heathen, does by nature the things that are written in the law. And so we could even say that they are a self-righteous, maybe self-righteous, but a self-governing Gentile having the law written in their hearts. So the advantage the Jew had, of course, again, is that they were chosen by God to be a light to the Gentiles, and so God gave them the written law so that there was no doubt about what their mission, if you will, was, and how they were to be the light unto the Gentiles. Verse 3, for what if some did not believe? Shall their unbelief make the faith of God without effect? God forbid. Yea, let God be true, and every man a liar, as it is written, thou mightest be justified in thy sayings, and might overcome when thou art judged. See, just because some didn't believe, and listen, there were Hebrews who came out of Egypt who did not believe. And that's going to beg some questions down the road here again, because God chose all of the Hebrews. He delivered all of them out, and yet even in choosing, some made the conscious decision not to believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Verse 5, but if our unrighteousness commend the righteousness of God, what shall we say? Is God unrighteous who takes vengeance? I speak as a man. I want to back up here for just a minute to verse 3. Where it says, shall their unbelief make the faith of God without effect? That phrase is kind of difficult, and really the word faith there could be better translated the word truth of God. And what they're talking about there in the truth of God is the promise that God gave to Abraham. What was the promise that God gave to Abraham? Well, for one thing, that he would be the father of many nations. For another thing, that anywhere he stepped his foot there in Canaan would belong to his people, the Jews or the Hebrews. So that, if you study the covenants, you'll find out really more about what that's relating to. But just because people don't believe doesn't negate the truth of God. It actually shows God's truth and God's promise, and that there's always been a remnant of people who've believed. All right, verse 5, but if our unrighteousness commend the righteousness of God, what shall we say? Is God unrighteous who takes vengeance? In other words, the word commend there means to mix together with, and that's kind of a real interesting thing. How in the world can we mix together our unrighteousness with the righteousness of God? First of all, that's like mixing oil with water, which we know can't can't even be done. I want to make sure I get this right. Yeah, the word is together with, to set, place, stand, to stand with. So listen, our unrighteousness can't stand with God's righteousness, and so God is righteous in taking vengeance. God forbid, for how then shall God judge the world? For if the truth of God hath more abounded through my lie unto his glory, why yet am I also judged to the sinner? And Paul's going to, listen, we're going to go down through this because it's going to really get, it's going to, the layers of the onion are going to come apart. And not rather as we slanderous be reported, and as some affirm that we say, let us do evil that good may come, whose damnation is just. What then? Are we better than they? No, in no wise. Now watch. For we have proved both Jew and Gentile, they are all under sin. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is none that understandeth, there is none that seeks after God. Now I'm going to stop right here for just a minute, because I want to make sure that we get this part out, because this is some of those verses that the Reformers and the Calvinists want to use to try to, and they take out of context to prove their doctrine. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. Absolutely true. That does not mean that we are totally depraved, because even unrighteous people do good works and do good acts. And so, we think of totally depraved, we think of people who are absolutely do nothing good. Now listen, those good deeds will never save us. That I agree with. I always use the analogy of the Jesus rejecting Marine who throws his body on a grenade or an IED to save his fellow man. You know what Jesus says about him? He says, greater love has no man than he gives up his life for a friend. And so even though that doesn't save that person, he has committed the ultimate sacrifice in sacrificing his life for another. So we need to be real careful there. But let's go to this. There is none that understands, there is none that seeks after God. I agree. And that is why God seeks us. Adam and Eve were in the garden. They disobeyed God. And they tried to cover their nakedness. But what else did they do? They hid from God. Now, we know through the scriptures that God would walk with them in the cool of the day. And on this particular day, when they fell, they hid from God. And it was no surprise to God that they did this. He wasn't shocked. Interesting that God goes out and into the garden, and he is, Adam and Eve, where are you? Hey, hello, where are you guys? It's not that God didn't know where they were. God wanted them to be open and honest about what they had done. And so the point is God seeks man. Man doesn't seek God. And we're going to get into this further and deeper as time goes on. But Jesus said, if I be lifted up, shall draw all to me. All. Everyone. And so there isn't a person who was ever born that God didn't seek to save. No one. All right. We'll stop this here and pick it up with the next one.